Sanjeev, welcome to Happy Lama 2025. How are you feeling? How's everything going?
Yeah, thank you. Hey everyone, good to be here and share my experience.
Right. So to begin with, you've studied at IIT Delhi, worked at Sony for a couple of years, now at Meesho. Very distinct ecosystems, very distinct cultures. Now, when you sit back and reflect on your journey, what is it that comes to your mind first? What would you like to share with us today?
Yeah, no, definitely it has been a very interesting journey, to say the least. It's been a long one as well. We started something back in 2015, right? And that point in time, I was working with Sony in Japan. Vidit was here, and we just decided to start up. Um, I think I wouldn't say that we had a clear idea in mind. We had bunch of ideas, uh, but what did but we did have a clarity that we wanted to create something that has like massive impact, and that was it, and that is what was inspiring enough for us to leave our job and start something. I think looking back, definitely we've created something that has pretty decent impact. Of course, there's a lot more to do. Um, so I think that's there, which kind of which I'm very happy about. Um, but I think through this decade, right, this has given me a lot of opportunity to grow personally and professionally. I think a lot has changed. Um, um, Simply I used to code, I used to build stuff. We started building stuff at Meesho. My role kept changing. I think in the beginning, though, it would change like every year, probably a big step jump, right from writing code to managing teams to building cultures and so on. Right, and it keeps evolving. So I think on the personal front, professional front, it does building a startup does change you a lot. You become a lot more resilient. You become comfortable with like ambiguities and just venturing into unknowns, right? So very fulfilling journey for me. It feels great to see taking e-commerce to like remote parts of the country, making it affordable, accessible to a lot of people, seeing a lot of suppliers scale on Meesho, and then practically like build business only by selling online through Meesho, right? Like a lot of success stories there. And of course, like most importantly, seeing people close to me, right? The entire team that we have built, like a lot of them joined us as freshers, grew, now managing teams. So that also is very fulfilling. But yeah.
And I'm sure multiple, exciting steps are on your way in your journey. So we look forward to that. Now, coming to the hot topic for which all of us are gathered here for, there's almost a running joke in the industry that if you're not using AI in your product, is anyone going to take you seriously? Now, given your experience, as the CTO of Meesho, and given the plethora of AI features that the platform has, what advice would you like to give to all of the budding founders who've joined us here in terms of implementing AI in their product? Because it's very tempting given their capabilities. So how do you strike a balance between, not jumping into the hype and deploying it wherever it's necessary to get the most out of it, but also not just giving into the fad and like, hey, everyone's going to use AI, I might as well do it too. So how do you approach that problem?
Yeah, it's a great question. Now honestly, as a tech leader, as a tech founder, it's pretty easy to give into hype because I think we are builders, right? You like to build, you like to create stuff, you like to see it working, and you naturally gravitate towards all the fancy stuff that happens out there. I think what we have, I think simple thing that has worked for us is you just stay strongly user first. So you just stay close to your users, like keep them in mind, keep the problem in mind, like the problem that you're trying to solve. Few things, right? Like, is this the right problem to solve for your users, depending on which stage of the company you are in? And second, also, like, is this the best way to solve that? And best also means fastest in most cases, because if you don't move fast enough, somebody else will. So, keeping the problem in mind generally helps you kind of evaluate newer tech stacks, AI algorithms, generative AI, I think more objectively. And just to give some example, right? Even after PMF, and things change a lot pre and post PMF because like things become a lot more clearer. But even after PMF for at least a year, like we never had a basic building block like caching into our architecture because it was never required. The scale was never big enough to need a cache. It was simple DB query. But I'm saying like the tech stack should be simple enough that helps you move faster and achieve the objective. Tech is a tool to help you solve a problem, right? So same for AI as well. Like in many cases, you will see traditional AI algorithms kind of end up solving your problem, the problem at hand, much more efficiently, much more accurately as well. So it's better to use that. Of course, Gen AI unlocks a lot of opportunities for you. Um, but there also, for example, build versus buy decision kind of is there and it matters a lot. For example, the most fanciest thing to do would be to train your old models from scratch, which is extremely costly. The second most fanciest thing to do would be maybe fine tuning an existing open source model. And you naturally gravitate towards that. But the moment you do that, maybe like riding onto the natural wave of models that that continue to improve like every 6 months, it just makes it harder. So can you just end up using some of the existing off-the-shelf models with the right rack setup? But I'm saying what I'm broadly trying to say is keep the problem at hand, make sure what you're doing creates good impact in a very short period of time. Everything else is secondary. So you don't have to fall to this hype ever. Like otherwise but it's important to stay aware. Like it's important to stay aware about the technology that is getting developed outside. Otherwise you'll never know like which is the right tool to use for your startup, right? So yeah.
Right now, I'd like to talk about building for India, and not just the folks for who are staying at HSR, Koramangala, or like let's say Sarjapur or Indranagar. When I talk about India, I mean the entire nation, and I don't think anyone would know better than you. So there are tons of product ideas out there, but what does it mean to build a UX or a user experience for India as a whole? Now, do you think there can be a single unified user experience for all Indians, especially when you're aiming to scale and serve problems for the large part of the country? So how do you approach that, and what does it mean to build a product for India?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Like building a product for India is hard because it's pretty heterogeneous, right? You have different cultures, different geographies, tons of languages getting spoken, different level of tech savviness as well. So there's just a lot of variations. Again, in this, like, what has really helped us is like just keeping the user persona in mind, right? And for example, even basic things like your choice of tech stack starts mattering a lot because let's say if you're building for tier 2 plus, like maybe you should make sure that your app is performant on low-end smartphones if you're targeting mass India. It has to be performant on Apache network as well. Now, and we end up making basic mistakes like if I'm sitting in Bangalore and creating an Android app, like I would obviously test on my phone, which is not really a low-end smartphone. And I would test on a Wi-Fi, which is not really Apache network. So you don't really understand the kind of problems that your user are going to face. What helped us, like, so internally we have this strong culture of going back to users, talking to them. So what we do is we go to them and we don't just talk to them, but we ask them to use our app in front of us. That itself like unlocks a lot of insights and will help you understand where are users getting stuck. What I'm trying to say is answer always lies with the users. On the tech stack bit, like for example, we have consciously chosen to stay away from React Native because on low-end smartphones, they're not performant. But for tech stack also, you have to be very conscious. You have to keep the persona in mind. On the UX side, I think simple things that have worked is just stay consistent, keep the UX simple, keep it visually rich as well because again, like people don't like to read and attention span is not very high. In the early stages, when like you don't have a lot of users who know how to use your app, like it's better to keep your interface similar to existing apps that your potential users end up using, which in India tends to be like most of us use WhatsApp, YouTube, Instagram, and so on, right? So if you stay consistent with their existing apps, it makes it easier for users to adopt to a new app. But yeah, I think there are a lot of things that you have to keep in mind, but the answer always lies with the users.
Right. So while building the user experience is usually, the second part of things, how do you approach picking a problem and then picking the right problem and then solving it right? Because of course, founders have a lot of ideas and a lot of problems that they have to solve. And once they decide on the problem that they need to solve, how do you balance the approach of wanting to innovate and reinventing the wheel versus solving the problem in its purest sense? Like, hey, you know what? I have a really good solution for this problem, but I don't use the fanciest of tech. Sometimes they might, go towards that complex. I might not be the coolest startup in town. So, what would your advice be to such founders, and how do you strike a balance between the two, given the attention that using fancy tech brings, whether it is on social media or the VC market? So, how do you approach that?
Yeah, I think time to impact is what matters. So I think if you want to grow fast, that is the only thing that matters, right? So at least in early stages, again, the answer changes a bit if you are operating at scale. Because then like cost starts mattering a lot, even basic things like server cost, for example, for us is a big deal, right? But for most people out there, like if a capability exists out there which is going to serve you, like broadly most of your use cases are going to get handled by that over the next couple of years, it's better to buy that solution. um, People do have this lens of core versus non-core, which is you should always own your core, always buy for non-core. But I would just say that even within the core, if you feel in the foreseeable future, most of the use cases will be powered by that, just go ahead with that. Like maybe choosing an open source tech stack where you have like managed services available for that makes it easier, because then if a day comes when you have to add a lot of new functionalities, like open source has that extensibility. But I think there's no simple way to decide what to do and whether you build, whether you buy. But it's extremely important that I don't think anything else matters. If you just cannot move fast and create impact for users, VCs are not going to matter. You're not going to get funding. Nobody likes to be part of a company that is struggling, right? Like, so ultimately, it's about just creating a lot more impact to the users, for your users in a very short period.
Right. And in terms of, building on top of existing technologies out there, do you think the Indian startup ecosystem is using open source enough?
Yeah, I feel like I feel like there are a lot of people. I think most of us out here end up building on top of open source tech stacks, and that helps us in moving faster as well. I think at least until now, like most companies out there have also, like most large companies also have their own open source programs running where they try to kind of contribute back to the ecosystem by, let's say, sharing all the modifications, maybe some newer capabilities as well. So I think that helps a lot. We should always, again, it comes with some caveats, right? Like making open source work for you is hard because, and especially in early stages, because like, I think open source is great if you can just, if you know how to use it. Like you'll just enter into a lot of, depending on which project you're using, you'll enter into a lot of issues around scalability. Maybe there are a lot of bugs out there if you're not referring to a popular open source project. So knowing and having that capability in your team to be able to debug quickly if something happens in production, understand that code base really well is important. Otherwise, what happens is it'll just slow you down the day you need help in either production issue or in terms of extending any of the functionalities. So just understand what you're getting into.
Right. And going back to AI, right? When we talk about AI, when we think about AI, we often think about the Anthropics, the Perplexities, or the Open AIs. But when it comes to the broader sense of population, the demographic, the Indian Tier 2 and Tier 3 demographic, what does AI mean for them? And how do you see AI solving problems in its current state? And how do you envision AI solving their problems and the challenges that they face in any of their daily life aspect, like education, employment, agriculture, anything that you can think of? How do you see AI transforming that demographic of our country, which also happens to be the majority, by the way? So how do you see that?
Yeah, I think Gen AI specifically unlocks a lot of new opportunities, right? Like the simplest one, which most of us use today, is a conversational interface, right? Now, everything can potentially become a can become a capability behind conversational interface, right? And that itself, like, simplifies access to information for most of this TG out there, because obviously, like, the tech savviness levels, the language differences, a bunch of other things just make it harder for many people in tier 2 and beyond to kind of access some of the information that is readily and easily accessible to people like us, right? So that conversational interface itself, I feel, is like very powerful. But if you just build on top of it, like education you mentioned, like I feel like a personalized AI tutor, which is an obvious use case, becomes like extremely complementary to the current education system, right? So can you just now use and build a personalized AI tutor, maybe in the language that the user is comfortable with, so that the person can just keep improving much more faster than through your traditional methods, right? Even access to information solves for a lot of other productivity related use cases. Maybe kirana shops today, for example, would end up like doing a lot of this logging on paper, and then they find it harder to maybe like mine information from that. Maybe I can help them in becoming more productive. Like within agri, like maybe access to a lot of information around how do you deal with different types of problems in agriculture, like access to weather information, access to a lot of other best practices, I'm sure becomes much easier with AI. So I think a lot of benefits there. One thing that I recently came across was this project Bhasini from Google. Maybe some of you would have heard of it. Like that's a pretty interesting initiative, right? Like pretty noble one as well. Like India has like a lot of dialects and languages, and I don't think there's like rich documentation and rich like hard documentation available for a lot of them, and hence like if you just don't have any record of them in a form that can be transferred to next generations, we'll end up losing them, right? So in a way, AI is helping us preserve culture and hopefully enabling them to express themselves in their own language in a better way. So I feel like Gen AI is unlocking a lot of potential use cases. In general, helping tier 2 plus. I feel there's a lot of opportunity in building for tier 2 plus as well, which I believe today we have only scratched the surface. As adoption increases, I feel like the people will end up building and solving for a lot of these problems over time.
Right, and I'm sure all of us hope that AI is the answer for many of India's problems and challenges. Thank you so much for the wonderful insights, Sanjeev. I'm sure our founders and the audience members will pick a few, go back home, and hopefully it does benefit on whatever they're working on. Give a round of applause for Sanjeev Banwal, folks.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you so much.